The two planes were flying over Germany, and European regulations clearly state that TCAS has priority over air traffic controllers.
For me, there was absolutely no explanation why something like this would happen.
Climb.
Why didn't the crew use TCAS the way it could and should be used?
By April 2001, TCAS was mandatory in most of the world. But investigators discover one notable exception: Russia. Could it be that the Russian crew did not know how to use TCAS? Rustam Mustafin is a former Bashkirian pilot. He confirms that even though not standard for domestic flights, planes flying overseas were specially fitted with TCAS.
As soon as the TCAS requirement was introduced, the training school of Bashkirian Airlines ensured that our pilots were trained to use the system.
Mustafin regularly flew with the pilots of flight BTC 2937.
By the time of the disaster, we had acquired extensive experience using it.
The crew knew how TCAS worked, but ignored its instructions. The Tupolev's flight manual, the pilot's operational Bible, reveals why.
We learned from these manuals that the orders from air traffic control always have a higher priority.
The operations manual at the time stated that the Air Traffic Control Command was to be given precedence over TCAS in the event of the system issuing an alert. It said that the air traffic control had the final authority.
Contrary to European regulations, the Russian crew were trained to use TCAS only as an advisory system and could choose to follow the controller's instructions if they wanted. They were following TCAS regulations, but Russian style.
I would have done exactly what these guys did. I would have carried out the air traffic control command.
Suddenly, we were able to understand why the crew acted the way they did.
Investigators have discovered why both planes were in descent. While the DHL crew had followed TCAS, the Russian pilots obeyed air traffic control. But this doesn't answer a more basic question. TCAS is meant as a system of last resort. The planes shouldn't be close enough even to trigger it in the first place. Investigators have turned their attention to the air traffic control room. A controller must advise pilots to change altitude at least 2 minutes before a potential conflict. But Peter Nielsen didn't tell the Russian crew to descend until just 43 seconds before collision.
BTC 2937 descent.
Why did the air traffic controller issue the separation order so late? So late that the danger of an accident actually existed.
Through shift logs and interviews, investigators learned that Nielsen was the only air traffic controller on duty on the night of July the 1st. Official Skyguide policy is to have a minimum of 2 air traffic controllers on duty at any given time. Investigators learn that it had become standard procedure at Skyguide for one controller to go on an extended break during the night shift. Tom Larsen was a close friend of Nielsen's, working alongside him for many years.
The way that Peter was doing night shift, we did that all the time. There would only be one controller because there was very little traffic.
Between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m., there are no scheduled landings at any of the airports in the area. But then, at about 11:25 on July the 1st, 2002, Nielsen is presented with an unexpected landing.
There was an approach into Friedrichshafen Airport, which he had to coordinate.
It's very unusual that one aircraft comes at that time for Friedrichshafen. I guess that the controller was a little surprised about that.
Regulations state that Nielsen must contact the airport control tower before bringing the delayed plane in for landing. This should be routine. One push of a button and the phone connects directly to the Friedrichshafen tower. But records show that Nielsen can't get through. Investigators learned that because of maintenance work, Nielsen's phone system was in backup mode. Even then, the controller should be able to make a call at the push of a button. But a technical examination of the phones reveals a terrible problem.
Dieses Backup, was als zusätzliche Verbindung noch,
The backup, which should have been there as an additional link, was not working that evening. Phone communication was not possible due to a technical problem.
Nielsen tries repeatedly to call Friedrichshafen. A routine task is suddenly taking up most of his time.
Die gewünschte Verbindung ist nicht möglich.
War mehr beschäftigt?
He was busier than would normally have been the case because he had no way of making phone calls. He had to look for alternate solutions. He had to look for other ways to communicate.
I lost my phone connection to Friedrichshafen. Could you please call them on your second set?
Preoccupied with handing over the delayed Airbus, Nielsen ignores the passing traffic.
It was like 5 minutes that he was focused on that problem. So that took his vigilance away from what was going on the screen, on the radar screen.
But his radar has an emergency function that should alert him of the impending danger. Short-Term Conflict Alert, or STCA.
Short-term conflict alert is another system like, it's similar to TCAS, just a ground-based system that helps us on the radar if we miss a conflict. If we don't see it in time, it will give us an alarm.
2 minutes prior to a potential collision, an STCA alert should flash on both of Peter Nielsen's radar screens, along with an audio warning. This is exactly what happens 180 kilometers away in Karlsruhe, Germany.
Die Flugsicherung in Karlsruhe
Air traffic control in Karlsruhe had detected on their radar screen that 2 aircraft were getting closer than they should have been.
als es eigentlich sein sollte.
Records reveal that the controller in Karlsruhe tries to call Nielsen to warn him. But Zurich's faulty backup phone system means he can't get through. Aviation rules say he isn't allowed to contact planes not in his sector unless the controller in charge has lost consciousness or has left his post. The Karlsruhe ATC decides to stick to protocol and tries calling Nielsen 11 times in total, but he never gets through.
BTC 2937.
Records show that Nielsen's visual STCA did not go off. Royce learns that Zurich's radar was also under maintenance, meaning it too was in backup mode.
Durch die geplanten Arbeiten an dem
The planned maintenance work on the radar system meant that not all the functions present during normal operations were actually available.
In backup mode, there is one particular emergency feature which Nielsen does not have. the visual STCA alarm. It's the final piece of the puzzle to explain why Nielsen didn't order the Russian plane to descend until a mere 43 seconds before collision.
Die Untersuchung hat für uns gezeigt, dass
The investigation showed us that a series of unlucky events all came together for air traffic control.
Situationen zusammengekommen sind.
Had Nielsen heard the STCA alarm before the plane's onboard TCAS systems kicked into action, there would have been no conflict, and the accident would have been avoided. But then, one final twist. 19 seconds before collision, Peter Nielsen tells the Russian pilots that the DHL plane is approaching from their right-hand side.
We have traffic at your 2 o'clock position, now at 360.
Where is it?
It is actually approaching from the left, the 10 o'clock position. The only explanation investigators can find for this mistake is stress. It's uncertain if the Russian pilots would have had time to pull up and avoid collision, even if they had spotted the DHL plane earlier. But the records show that in the final seconds, they tried. Upon impact, the Bashkirian charter breaks into 4 pieces. Without its tail fin, the DHL cargo plane spins uncontrollably to the ground. February 21st, 2004. As investigators write up their final report, Vitaly Kaloyev flies to Zurich. He's become obsessed with finding somebody to blame for the death of his wife and children.
I wanted to hear them say, we are responsible, but forgive us if possible. They killed so many children and nothing had happened. No apologies, no expressions of sorrow, nothing.
Nielsen still worked at Skyguide, but was moving into areas of safety analysis. Kaloyev found where he lived.
I went to see the controller. I knew he had been on duty that night. All this had to be brought to an end. Everything had to be closed. I didn't want to wait any longer and decided to finish this myself. Nielsen came out. He was taller than me. I showed him the photos of my children lying in their coffins. He pushed my hand away. Then he got what he deserved. You know, some say it was revenge, but revenge is something insignificant. One is avenging when one has been deeply insulted, but this was not revenge. This was punishment.
In Switzerland, a man has been arrested in connection with the killing of an air traffic controller who'd been on duty when 2 planes collided 2 years ago.
Hunted down and stabbed to death in front of his family. Murdered for a fatal mistake.
Peter Nielsen was 36 years old. He and his wife had 3 children. After his arrest, Vitaly Kaloyev is held in a psychiatric institution, while the court decides whether he's mentally fit to stand trial. Kaloyev is convicted of premeditated killing and sentenced to 8 years in a Swiss prison. In November 2007, he's released after an appeal determines that he had acted with diminished responsibility